that energy in the entire universe is the same amount. It doesn't get more, there's not more or less. We perceive rejection as something that's painful, but that's because we're looking at something from a one-sided perspective. If we look at our primitive days, we wanted to be part of a group and we wanted to feel safety in a group.
In what contexts? Where are you experiencing pleasure as you've just described?
People want to be strong so that people invest in them.
What is it that I have to do in order to experience that thing?
It's difficult to understand where the pelvic floor is.
Hello, Tanya. Welcome back to Conversations with Coaches. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks, Taz, and you?
I'm well, thank you. So this was another highly requested topic from my audience, and it also resonates with me, which is the fear of rejection. So this is something that came up as feedback from my audience. What are you struggling with right now? There was a lot of fear of rejection. And so I'd love to dive into this and deconstruct it. So do you have any opening remarks on having the fear of rejection?
It is a very common fear for a lot of people, because if we look at our primitive days, we wanted to be part of a group and we wanted to feel safety in a group. So, in some cultures, if you were ever banished from the group, it would mean death for you. And so it's so hardwired in ourselves that when we feel rejection, it can actually feel like someone's physically hurt us, because it can feel that painful. I'm sure everyone has a moment that they had someone say no, or they don't want to spend time with them or don't want to be with them. And that hurt is so deep. So we're wired to want to be a part of the group and suffer if we're not.
Okay, that's so interesting. But now I don't know if that makes it more depressing, like we can't fix it, like it's in us, but we'll get into that. And something else that I want to bring up, because right now you said how when we get that rejection, it can be so painful, like sometimes you feel you can actually die. But even for me anyway, even sometimes the projected fear of rejection, so imagining that fear of rejection in the future, can be equally crippling. It can make me not take action on something. It can make me have physical reactions in my physiology, having this feedback because I'm so fearful of that rejection. So why is it that even when this is in your mind, when there's just that possibility of the fear of rejection, for me, it seems as bad. Sometimes it's actually worse than the literal rejection.
Well, for sure. So if we deconstruct that, we have to look at what is actually driving that, because it hasn't yet happened, yet you fear it so greatly. So is that you essentially rejecting yourself? Is that you rejecting an idea? Let's say, for example, you really want to go and do more business. And then you think you go in and market a new product or a service, or you go out there in social media land, and then you have this fear of rejection coming up. No one's rejected you yet you're projecting onto them. So it's essentially you rejecting you and what you want to do. So we have to look. So anytime we look at rejection, we want to look at where ultimately does it come from. And so often, if we can go back and look at our childhood, and we look at what are the dynamics we had, when we were growing up, and, sometimes we can feel rejected by a parent, for example, or by a sibling who was a few years older and didn't want to have a connection with you. And so there's a deep seated feeling of rejection. And I've seen often with, say, for example, if it's a mother that rejected the daughter, they have struggles with trying to connect with women, and struggles and find themselves in these repeated behaviors of being rejected by women, even though they don't seem to know why. It just seems to happen again and again. I don't know if you can relate, or you know someone who's gone through that experience. And so we can often end up replicating the same experience we had as a child, and we replicate it again in business or in our relationships because it's an unloved part of our past that we haven't yet loved.
Okay, so yes, I can definitely relate to what you're saying. And then I want to check. So at the beginning, you said this is something that is almost programmed into us, wanting to be part of the crowd. And now you've said that those experiences in earlier years, or obviously it can be in later years if it was something that really affected you. But do we all have that innate fear of rejection to some degree? And then when we have the experiences, it just exacerbates that.
I don't know. I wouldn't say everyone has it. I think we have it in varying degrees, and that we do have, some people have had more, in their perception, more rejection than others. And so then it's imagine like a snowball effect, you've had it since you were a child, and then you had it in teenage years, and it was quite, harsh in teenage years. And then you go into adult, and then you try a new business, and there's more in your perception rejection, or relationship rejection, or even spiritual rejection. And so there becomes this, compounding of rejection. So then when someone rejects you and you don't even know them, like I've had one particular client who had a long-term marriage and then had a short relationship with someone, very short relationship, and they were more upset and hurt by the rejection of the short relationship than they were of the rejection of the long-term relationship. And so that's because of the compounding of unresolved resentment that actually builds up to not be able to handle it, or it to be bigger than what it actually is.
Okay. So what is our first step if we feel we really struggle with this fear of rejection and it's holding us back? Like what are the questions we would ask ourselves, or the first steps we would take to start deconstructing this?
For sure. So I would look at, is it a repeat pattern? Is it something that you've noticed previously in your past experience of life? And then go to the original time it ever started, because when you start there, it goes to the original point of when you perceived someone to reject you, and go to that first moment. And so we perceive rejection as something that's painful, but that's because we're looking at something from a one-sided perspective. We're looking at all the pain and challenge. Sometimes you might hear people say, I'm really grateful for the, ending of a relationship or whatever, or, a friendship ending because it's made me who I am today. And so they can appreciate the growth and the change in the present day. But if they go back to the moment of where it first happened, where the individual rejected them, then they feel the pain. So we have to go back to the main moment of like the pain point in their perception, and ask the question, how did it serve them in that moment that the individual in their perception rejected them? Because ultimately, rejection is a perception. It's your perception because you wanted them close to you, and then now they're moving away from you, and you've labeled that as rejection. That's a feeling that you feel inside of you. So if you can then stack up benefits and how does it serve you? How is it helping you to grow? What's the benefit? What's it freeing you of your time and your energy? And once you can unlock what the blessings are, it actually frees you of that feeling. So that feeling that you have that feels that hurt and pain point internally, you can feel lighter and more freedom as a result by shifting your perception and being able to see how it serves you.
And I want to go a little more into that, where you're saying this is your perception at the end of the day. So someone's going to say, no, but that person did reject me. It's truth. It is what it is. So what do you mean exactly by the perception? Could another person view it as the opposite?
Well, no one's in control of how you feel. No one's saying you have to feel happy or sad. That's your brain and your chemistry inside of your brain that's making you feel that particular way. And it's our perceptions, because someone can have the same individual reject them and they're like, I don't really care, and they're off doing something else. But it's the individual we tend to be really attached to and also look up that we feel rejection and hurt. So if we don't like someone and we have a real issue with them, and let's say it's a family member that pushes your buttons and they reject you, you can be like, I don't really care. Or it's a friend that you not really that connected to and interested in, and they reject you, and you don't have an issue with it. but it's the people that we care more deeply for, or we've put up on a pedestal and we really admire them. If they reject us, we're like, that hurts. So it is a perception. No one's telling you how to feel but you. So if we can shift our perception and be able to appreciate that we're actually co-creating the rejection. And I know that's a big thing to, whoa. It's like, how could I be co-creating when I didn't make a decision?
Or I don't want that thing.
Every time we ask that question, it's like, why did you want that individual to not be connected to you anymore? When we really dig, and people are like a bit confronted by that question, but when we really dig deep underneath it, they actually go, I wanted separation from that individual anyway. So I'll tell you a story. So I have two people, and they've been friends for more than 10 years, and done, over the years, done a little bit of business together, but mainly friendships and a lot of personal development. One of them has gone off on a new venture, has a new friend, and the result of that has then left the other individual a little bit on the outs and has felt rejected by this friend. And so they're not seeming to connect anymore. And then there's been some other dynamics at play. And so the question I asked one of the individuals was, why did you want your friend to no longer be friends with you anymore? Why do you want separation? And they're like, well, I don't. I really want to be friends with them. I really value. And I'm like, no, let's get real. Like, why? Why do you not want to be friends with them for now? And as we actually uncovered, they actually want to be closer to their relationship because they want to have a baby and they want to have that closer connection. And it doesn't allow room and space when the friend is around because they're more connected to the friend than they are to their spouse. And so then as we're uncovering it, it's like, actually, I want a new, direction for my life and my future. And so I can't, instead of being connected to her, it's the disconnection is allowing more space to be connected to something that's important to her relationship, and also, sprout the idea of having a family for the two of them together and grow into 3. And so then you can't say that she just has rejection because she has her partner, her spouse moving closer to her, the idea of having a family also blossoming. So she's getting, support and challenge, but it's her perception that labeled the exit of the ending of that friendship as bad, as opposed to looking at what is being birthed and what is the blessings that's coming out of the ending of that. Because anytime we have a void, anytime something moves away and there's an empty space, something has to fill it. And so it's like we often have new friends come in. We start doing things life differently as a result. We stop subordinating and listening to what, other people around us has been doing, and we get to step into our own power as a result of people rejecting us. So we kind of want to embrace that rather and embrace our perception of that.
So then another valuable question I'm guessing to ask is, when you're feeling that rejection, you want to say, what is the opposite for you? Is that acceptance or is that inclusion? And who is now accepting me? Who is now including me? Who wants to be with me? And to actually see how those pieces are moving, right?
100%. I mean, that in itself is freeing because it means that that means that when you have permission also to leave a relationship and not speak to someone that you don't feel like you want to have a connection with them anymore, because as you move away from them, it frees space for someone else to come in that they can have a closer connection with. So it gives you permission to also exit as well, which is what we want. We want to have the freedom to be able to come and go that fits us. And
in this theory that you're speaking of here, can we go more into this theory? Because you're basically saying it's like a action reaction, right? Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah. So if we look at it from a universal principle, it's that nothing is ever gained or lost. It's just transformed. So it means that energy in the entire universe is the same amount. It doesn't get more. There's not more or less. And so we perceive that we are getting something when we have an individual around us, and then the moment they leave, we think we've lost something. That's not true. That's just a misperception that we've lost it. So we want to broaden our perspective, and we want to broaden our awareness to be able to see, well, who is coming in at the moment someone's moving away from us. Because when we really look at it and we analyze it, there is some kind of conflict we had with the individual or within ourselves. And then when someone comes close to us, we actually have a more connection. We can learn from them. We have similar interests. And so there's there's another connection that we can make there that's more important than the other one, even though we think that one's important.
Yeah. And then I'm going to take what you're saying here and flip it sort of and say, I think another beneficial thing to look at is when let's say we want to go into a new business venture. I'm using a business venture as a thing, and you want to start a new project, let's say, and we fear the rejection of the group that we want to present this project to. And something that I've learned is to actually then realize what you're going to lose if you gain that, whatever you're trying to gain in that group. If you're trying to gain a new following, you're starting a new business. So you fear the rejection, but what if you get the success you want? You're going to lose something else. So for me, the reason this came up is because I thought of the example for me when I started my new business, and I thought, okay, when I started Alchemy, okay, I'll just have a new business and that'll be great and I'll have more. And then in the early stages, my relationship with Matthew was strained because obviously now my energy was going into that. So even though, yes, I gained that business and then I didn't experience that rejection the way I feared I would experience it in the business, but then my relationship became strained as a result because I just didn't have that same energy. So it's also that thing, again, with realizing you might gain something, but you're going to lose something else, right?
I know, that's like a whole new level of the concept of what we're talking about. So, and people are like, whoa, what? So it means that if no energy is ever lost, it's just gaining and losing equally at the same time. It's just transforming. That also means that anytime, so if I go back to the dynamic I was talking about with the friends, the other friend has a new friend. And so they have a real deep connection on a particular topic in business, which that friend has a high value in. And so she's been moving towards that friend for quite a while. And so they're getting a closer dynamic. And as she's moving away, she's actually losing the other friend because there's now 3 in a dynamic, and 3 in a dynamic. If you're aware of that, sometimes you're like, someone becomes a third wheel and she's become feeling like a little bit out. But also because she's not matching the same values, or she doesn't have the same interests as the other two now
at this point.
And so we do have this, and that's why it's a balancing of energies. We have the same thing. If we go focus and put our energy, you see that with sometimes in bodybuilders, for example, and they're so focused on their bodybuilding and their food and their intake and their training and their regime. They're so focused that they lose kind of connection with the outside world until after they've finished their competition, because they're so focused. And so we do have this gain and loss, or acceptance and rejection dynamic that's happening at every level. Even if we move towards something, we're moving away from something else.
And then I feel like the next thing I want to bring up, because if people hear this, they're going to say, well, then what's the point? What's the point of pursuing something? Or what's the point of, if I'm going to now lose something else, I'm not getting anywhere?
Well, essentially you have to get clear with what you want and what's important to you. And so it's more about giving you freedom to be yourself. It's like you'd rather have everyone or the group against you than you against yourself. Because you being against yourself and you rejecting you comes and shows up in autoimmune diseases. It comes in the self-talk that we have inside of our brain that just is relentless sometimes. It's really hard to calm down, and the lowering of self-worth. And that's the rejection of self. And that is harsh, and that costs a lot. So it's like I'd rather have the rejection from the outside world than the rejection from the inside world. And so if you can stay connected to what's most important to you and not minimize and play small relative to other people, then you just flow with the changes and the world changing around you because you feel solid inside of you.
I wanted to circle back to something that you touched on earlier, which I loved, where you were explaining how even if, as the person who is possibly rejecting someone else, you don't need to feel a guilt about that, because you're actually allowing space in that person's life for someone or something else to move into that space. And so I just wanted to circle back and touch on that again, because you mentioned it and I thought that's so beautiful, because sometimes we put off, I'm going to label it as rejecting someone or something or a project or a job or whatever it is, because we don't want to like hurt that person. So we prolong that. But actually, by doing what is more true to you, you're allowing space for something that's more true to that other person to move in, right?
For sure. So I have a client of mine, and she has been grappling for a while in terms of being able to leave and exit the relationship. And so they're both in their prime, if you want to call it that. Is that a thing? Prime, like baby making years too.
Okay.
And so they're in like mid 30s. And so she's worried, and she had been worried about telling her husband that she wants to end the relationship. And so she'd been walking on eggshells about how to go about doing it. Do I do it nice and gently? And kind of really grappling with the idea. But she was caring so much that she was actually somewhat also delaying, because she knew she was going to do it. She knew that she was going to, but she didn't want to hurt him because she loved him, but she just doesn't see a future with him. And so she then had to really sit with being comfortable that as she's saying no and rejecting, that it gives him the freedom to go out and find someone that's actually more aligned. And it's actually costing him and her not to do it now. Like for her to delay it longer and longer is delaying the inevitable, but also delaying the opportunity for them to heal their dynamics that they have going on and find a potential relationship in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. And I think that's something just useful to keep in mind. You know, sometimes we also maybe put ourselves on a bit of a pedestal by saying we don't want to hurt that person. But you can't be responsible for someone else's feelings if no one else is responsible for your feelings. Yeah. You know, sometimes I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but sometimes you can say no to someone or say no to someone and they can go, thank God. Yeah. Like, I'm so, relieved.
They're like really happy about it. And so you don't ever know the ramifications of what you do. I still remember, I don't know, do you have Landmark in your...
No, what is that?
So there's a personal development program that's in Australia, and it's Landmark. And one of the things they do is they have to ring up someone that they've done hurt by and rejected in a way, or hurt in some way, shape, or form, and they have to ring up and apologize. So I just remember one time this ex-relationship from a very long time ago, and we did not date for very long. He rang me up and said, Tanya, I've got to say something to you. And I'm like, yeah, okay. It's a bit strange that you're calling me and it's been so long. I just want to apologize for hurting you and what I had said to you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, because he had said that if it was no one else in the world and I was only had, a few people that I was like trapped on an island in the middle of nowhere, I would not want it to be you. And I was like, I thought it was funny. Like, it's a way to end a relationship. Yeah. That's pretty inventive. But I just thought it was funny and I laughed it off, and my girlfriends had a laugh at the end, and it was just like, no big deal. And so, but they were really worried that I had that he had severely hurt me and I had felt really rejected by it. Yeah. But I'm like, that's my responsibility, how I choose to perceive something, which I could have been really hurt by. But I also could have gone, well, it's one individual's opinion, compared to, compared to my own opinion of myself. You can't be responsible for someone else's feelings. They have to be responsible for their own. Yeah.
And I think the only thing you can really do is be as truthful to yourself as possible. Because like you said, you can never know how someone is going to feel or react. So there's no point in trying to manage that from like something external. You can only do what is most truthful to you at that point. With the information you have. So something else I wanted to touch on, and I think this is because this is something that I get caught up in a lot, and I've recently found out it's not true. I would always think that people who do more don't experience this fear of rejection or don't experience it to that degree. And then I recently was chatting to a speaker who he speaks for a living. He's a very well-known speaker. And then he said how when he started speaking, it was like crippling. He physically could not speak to 5 people. He now has hundreds of thousands of people as an audience. And that really flips it for me. And I realized I always thought these people don't have this problem. That's why they can do what they do. And it was so interesting to find out that was not true.
Yeah, so we all have grading degrees of rejection. And sometimes we can work through our rejection. We think, okay, I've handled it and I'm doing really well. And then somehow something comes along and it's like it kind of floors us again.
Yeah.
And so rejection has beautiful blessings in it. Like, it actually frees your time to go and do something that you would really love to do. It gets you, it shows in a speaking context that maybe you really care about what you share and you really want the audience to really get what you're trying to say. And so that's like the fear of rejection comes up because you're like, I really want them to get it. And what happens if they don't? And what happens if they reject me and my ideas? And so it's underneath that is showing that you genuinely care. And so we want to find, if we can find the blessings in it, you almost want to lean into it rather than run away from it, because imagine then we wouldn't really do much then if we were trying to avoid feeling rejected. But it also ties in really nicely as well with, anytime we feel rejected, what we're actually saying underneath that is we really want acceptance. And so it's our addiction sometimes to people accepting us and liking us and wanting people close to us that actually makes the rejection hurt even more when you don't get that. So it's our pull to being liked that's actually the deeper issue and problem.
And then what are the steps if you think, oh yes, actually maybe that's me? What are the steps that you would take then?
Yeah. So you want to look at the cost. So most times people aren't aware of what the cost is to being accepted. They're like, oh, like it's easier to go and find the benefits of rejection. That's easy. Go and work on that. But if you're looking at the acceptance, it's like, oh, that's a little bit harder to look at the cost of it. But you want to take it off the pedestal to think it's great. Because sometimes, for example, when you're being accepted, you might end up going with the crowd. Or I've got one particular client and she started off as building her audience, and she did things to be accepted and liked by the audience. And so a lot of the audience were then telling her what to do, and she was doing that, and then she was growing her audience even bigger. And then she found out, a few years later that she didn't even like who she was, and she had to come out and perform and for people liking her. And she lost herself in amongst trying to please the outside world, that she ended up, in a way, rejecting herself. And so if we want to take off the idea that people liking us is what we're seeking, so what's the cost of that? And then be prepared for people to like and dislike you on your path. Like, that's the point we want to get to. Not every time you go and speak to people, there are people who are going to like you and dislike you. Every time you go and meet a group of people like you and dislike you. Not everyone's cup of tea. And if you're not everyone's cup of tea, you have to be comfortable with that sometimes people won't like, and you don't like other people too. Yeah. Like, you don't like everyone that you meet. You even like certain people. So it gives other people and you permission to just be yourself. And then acknowledge that some people will want to hang out with you and others won't. And sometimes even as we grow, being in the personal development, industry, it's like a constant evolution. I don't know if you feel the same way, but every few years, it's like, gosh, who I was back a couple of years ago is not who I am today.
Yeah.
And so how are you going to connect with, if you're still connecting with people you went to primary school with?
Yeah.
Even though you've grown so much, how does that work? So in a way, each time we have this, new level of evolution within ourselves, we also might find ourselves, moving away from people and moving closer to other people because we feel more connected with them.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives us that freedom to do that.
Yeah. And then that again circles back to what you're saying about giving yourself that permission, not holding onto a certain friendship, relationship, job, whatever, because you feel it's the right thing to do, but actually giving yourself that permission to move in a new direction and knowing those people will be fine as well because they will subsequently move in a new direction. Something else I wanted to touch on is, do you think that this fear of rejection, which seems so prevalent now, is also a result of this do more, culture that we are in, do more, impact more, be more, which is maybe not authentic to everyone. I feel like it is seen that doing more is better, having more impact in the world is better, being an entrepreneur is better, having a business is better than, just living. And because we feel this in us, we're like, okay, I have to do more, but I'm terrified. And maybe it's because it's actually, the hard truth is that thing is not authentic to you.
100%. So as we go on our journey of whatever it is in life, if we are really truly congruent with who we are and we know ourselves, we love ourselves, we feel expressive to the outside world in ourselves, you won't even think as much about acceptance and rejection. You just be.
Yeah.
But it's when we find ourselves doing things like, you hear it in the midlife crisis dynamic, you've lived their life doing what everyone else wants to do. And then they have this like crisis where they just go, you know what, I'm sick of being, what everyone else wants me to be. I'm going to reject everyone else and I'm just going to do what I want to do. That's kind of the
and
extreme.
And then it swings to the other side, right?
Yeah. And then they can get a bit too self-righteous and a bit too, like I'll do whatever I want and I don't care about anyone else. And then they find that that's painful too and they come back to a medium. Yeah. But essentially, if you can stay true to you, then you're not so concerned about the outside world. And then you'll also know whether it's in your purpose to go and impact, millions of people. But some people, it's not. It's like the idea is great, but it's not who they truly are. They'd rather go and impact a small amount of people. And that is just as meaningful as going and impacting half of humanity. Like it's not better to do one way or the other, because we forget about the ripple effect of when we make impact, that you can impact one individual that then has this ripple effect onto all of humanity. And so we want to, in a way, do what feels congruent for us, regardless of what is happening in society and what the rest of the world is doing.
Oh, that was such a beautiful insight. And I hope that people can take that on board. It's so freeing if you can slowly start chipping away at that. I don't think you should expect to one day wake up and feel this way, but if you can start just chipping away at that and becoming a little bit more authentic to yourself, true to yourself, listening to your inner voice versus the voices on the outside, just a little bit each day or week, it's going to help. And before we wrap up, I think I just want to pull everything together and say, okay, so if someone's listened to this whole episode and they're like, okay, but I want to do something and I'm fearing the rejection. Do you have 1, 2, 3 steps they can take or questions they can ask to start moving in that direction?
For sure. Like when we don't take action because we think it's going to be painful, challenging. So we want to flip that. So you want to look at if you want to say no to someone and you don't want them, in your life anymore, or you want to move away and say no to a client or say no to a business opportunity, you want to look at the benefits to you. How's it going to serve you? What are you going to do? And what's also the benefit to them? Even though you might not share this with them, you just knowing that it's going to be a service and a benefit to them for you to say no and you to move away from them. Well, and not just 1 or 2 benefits, but like 10 or 20 or 30, like so many that sometimes you have like tears dripping down your face because you're like, whoa, it's actually going to be the biggest gift I can give them is actually to say no and move away.
Yeah.
And so when you know that and then you go, regardless of if you tell them or not, or you just gradually move away, you energetically, they're also going to feel that shift and change in them as well. And so, and then you also get more certain in your decision, so that doing those 2 things are going to be freeing, because then if you have to go and say no after you've done those 2 questions, the benefits to you and the benefits to them, you're so certain of it. It's like no one's going to waver you from going, oh, maybe, you want to stay friends or you want to say yes to the opportunity. You're like, no, I have to do what feels congruent for me.
And then I just want to go a bit deeper onto that one. Like, let's say you want to, I see this in a lot of people that I know, they want to do a project, or they want to do something that's more public, and they have that fear of rejection. In that case, what should they be asking themselves?
Yeah. I mean, one is you could ask those similar questions. That's okay. One is I would think about the individual that you want to speak to, and the individual that that as you speak and you share your product or your service, your idea with the world. If you think about them and you think about the difference that your product, service, or idea could make for their life, it's like you then feel this like
you can't not.
More of a how could you not?
Yeah.
Like, would you rather help one individual? And some people are not going to like it and they're not going to be engaged with it, but they're not your people anyway.
Yeah.
But if you could make a difference, and be okay with that, because not everyone's your cup of tea and not everyone's your client either. But if you can make a difference to one individual, that's, that can be life-changing.
Yeah.
And so often when we get too stuck, and we get too focused sometimes on ourselves, and we think, well, I can't do it. It's about, I'm too scared, like getting up and speaking. I'm too scared. What are people going to think about me and being rejected? But sometimes it's like, let's just get connected with the audience. Let's get connected with that one individual that's struggling so much. And they hear a message that drops in for them and it's so profound. They're like, I cannot live my life like this anymore. Then that, you're focused on them and you've made a difference. And so that makes it fulfilling. And then you're not even thinking about, did someone reject me or accept me anymore? Because you're thinking, I've just made a difference in someone's life.
Yeah. And there's honestly nothing better than that feeling. And it's like, how can you not? How can you not do that thing? Yeah. Alrighty. So we're going to wrap up. And today I'm going to reframe our final question, which I normally ask you. And so what would you say it means to live a world-class life with the idea of this fear of rejection or acceptance in the background?
So I would say to live a world-class life, that with that fear in the background, it would be about doing what your soul, you feel called to do. Like to go listen, if it means doing something, to deeply listen and hear what your soul is here to do and what your purpose is. And our purposes change over life, by the way. They're not set in stone, but as they evolve. So go listen to that. Go follow that rather than trying to get praise and, build up followers and get the audience to really like you. It's like, because when you deliver a message out there that's got heart, that's got soul in it, people feel it. And the perfect people get attracted to you as a result. And they're the ones that want to follow you and listen to you. And they're the people you want to follow you and listen to you anyway. So you would rather have a small army of very inspired people that love hearing what you have to say than like the masses that aren't even really that tuned in or really that engaged, or it's not really making that big of a difference in their lives.
Yeah. All right. I loved today's episode. Thank you so much for all of these shares. I think it was great for me. I hope it was good for our audience as well. So thank you, Tanya, for your time. It's so appreciated. Until next time, I see you at the next perfect time. That's what you always say.
Yes, I will. I will see you at the next perfect time.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
So if anyone wanted to come and, stick their hand in a pot of honey and get some of the goodness, then they can come and join the Students of Wisdom. You find it on Facebook group, Students of Wisdom, Tanya Cross, and I'd love to see you in there.
Perfect. And are there any, I know you do other things as well. We normally mention them. Do you want to bring them up?
Sure. So I do group coaching, which is an opportunity for you to level up in your mindset in business. And also if you are a coach, you'd really love to learn some of the softer skills and how to create a business and how to grow a profitable business as well. Then I have different levels. So you can also find that at maximumgrowth.co.
Perfect. And then it is tanyacross.com, your website. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, I'd encourage people to check that out. I think I have spoken before about your weekly coaching. I've been a part of that and it's a very valuable program. So it is, obviously Tanya's in Australia, but she does it at a time that we can also join from South Africa and the UK and stuff. Yes. So that is something that's really good. And it's something that keeps you so accountable. All you have to do is basically show up twice a week, once or twice a week. There are recordings as well. And, it's just dedicated time to actually working on yourself and investing in yourself and your personal development. So it's something that I highly recommend, and it's also accessible to any level of person. If it's your first encounter with personal development, or if you've gone down the rabbit hole already, you would still find it beneficial. So that's something that I can definitely vouch for. Tanya, thank you again. Until next time, stay well.